It's wisdom.
No. I'm sorry. I was just getting, I'm a little janky today. Quick look it up. Just kidding. Here.
Prince,
Here.
Tao,
Here.
Tolbert,
Here.
Yang,
Here.
Jalali.
Here.
Council President Brenmoen.
Here.
7 present, no one absent.
Today we have Assistant Chief Rob Thomaser from the St. Paul Police Department with us. He will be giving a report later and he will be leading us. If we will all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Consent agenda items 5 through 7 are before you for your consideration.
Is there anything from consent that should be taken separately? It looks like nothing separately. So Ms. Jalali moves consent. Roll call.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang.
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The consent agenda is adopted.
Ms. Prince moves suspension of the rules. Roll call.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang.
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. Rules are suspended. And we now have a presentation from the police department.
So colleagues, I've had opportunity to talk with many of you, and I think we're all fully aware that there has been an increase in random crimes in the recent months, including particularly carjacking and robbery. Community members are understandably concerned, and as such, we have asked the Assistant Chief of the St. Paul Police Department, Rob Thomaser, to join us today to share information directly from the police department. I think it's good for the community to hear directly. There's a lot of information gets shared on social media, and we hear part information. And so using our council meetings as a platform is a great opportunity to hear directly from the police about work that is happening. We've asked particularly if Assistant Chief Thomaser can cover some context. We would like to understand data, information about trends, and just getting kind of our hands around the problem. We'd like to get an understanding of what the St. Paul Police Department is doing to manage this increase. If there's information about the source of the problem, where it's coming from. And then also, I think importantly, understanding what we as residents can do to help protect ourselves and make it easier for police to do their job and also not create crimes of opportunity. So we asked Assistant Chief to join us just yesterday afternoon, and I really appreciate that you were able to join us on such short notice. We recognize that we may have questions that you might not have answers for yet today, and that's okay. Just let us know, and you can always get back to us, or we'll bring you back to check in again in the future. But I feel like it's timely and important that we hear from you. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Council President Brenmo and council members, thank you. I appreciate your invitation today. I'd like to first say Chief Axtell regrets his ability to not be here. He's actually in Quantico this week and meeting with other police leaders about this exact topic. He's at the FBI Academy out there. I've kind of organized some notes that I'll just kind of throw out there for everybody to kind of give us a footing from which to start. I am working on presenting a staff report that the council can have tomorrow, which will have some of the data that goes into some of the talking points today about what we're seeing in some of our trends. So if that's okay with you, I'll just start in that order. So as you know, last year we were historically challenged as a city. We had a crime index that was up 15%, which meant we recorded about 2,000 more Part 1 crimes than we did in 2019. Violent crime especially posed a significant challenge for us. We had a homicide rate that we wish we could change. We had 220 people struck by gunfire in 20 compared to about 164 in 2019. And again, as I said, these are stats we wish we could change. There was also the unprecedented civil unrest in May, and in addition to that, we also had about 300 other marches, demonstrations, or protests occurring in the city, which we had to staff. So all of this, of course, was happening while there was a global pandemic happening. So that's kind of the recap of last year. And in my staff report, I'll be able to provide you the exact numbers of what we recorded for both Part 1 crimes and the clearance rates for those crimes. This year, we're off to a little bit of a concerning start. The crime one, or the Part 1 crime index in this year so far, we've recorded 73 more crimes than we did last year. That doesn't make a trend yet as far as the overall crime index for the city this year, but there's a couple of areas of which we're really concerned. The crimes that are up by category this year, of course, what the triple was the homicides, but we're also looking at increased egg assaults, thefts, auto thefts, commercial burglaries, and arsons made the list, which and I'm asking for a little bit more information on. When we look at these trends, of course, you're all aware of the disturbing trend with carjackings. We have on the list also commercial burglaries and catalytic converter thefts, which are really occupying a lot of our resources right now. We're hearing from our community, just like you, and we hear their concerns. We appreciate their phone calls. We appreciate their emails. We appreciate them sharing the potential evidence that they have on their Ring cameras or other brand name cameras. And we just are frankly grateful for them being involved at the level that they are. And as I said earlier, we clearly understand their concerns. Like the people we serve, we are doing everything, and we want to do everything we can to keep our city safe. To do this, we're paying attention to some key factors. First is the demand on our resources. With reports of crime being up, this is an additional strain that's on our investigative resources. And as you know from Chief Axel's testimony in the past, these investigations are oftentimes complicated. We are dedicating significant staff time to preparing for the March events. We all know that's going to be potentially a regional challenge. So in addition to the increased crime rates, we're looking at what efforts need to be in place so that we're prepared as a city and as an agency for the trials that are occurring or other events that might occur in our city or our region. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention we have a little bit of a diminishing workforce. Our current deployable number, I think that's something that we always talk about from the police department because that's the resources that we have to do the work. We right now deployable are about 570. We know that with the delayed academy that we had from 2020, that we're going to lose more officers before we replenish through the year. So we are working very hard to ensure that we can adjust our department quickly, and we can adjust the department in a way that is prioritizing and working on the trends and the demands that are coming our way. As I mentioned, this is all through prioritization, and it takes a great deal of our time. As you would expect, we prioritize and we focus on violent crime. Now, these are the crimes that certainly hurt the people the most. We know that when we are staffed correctly and we have staff in the right places, we can be effective. We're proud to post a homicide clearance rate of over 90% in 2020. That far exceeds the national average, but the truth is, in achieving that mark, it was significantly or very costly to other crime categories in the city. By putting all those resources on that crime type, we have to not have as much coverage in other areas. Again, this is
Chief,
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to quick double check. You mentioned something about slides. Do you have slides you were going to share with us, or you just have prepared notes?
No, I appreciate you clarifying, Council President Brenmo. No, I'm just going through an outline.
Okay.
A lot of this will be contained in a staff report that you'll get tomorrow. So if you want to look up a particular number or stat or whatever, I'll have all that to you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt. I wasn't quite sure if I didn't hear you correctly. I wanted to make sure if you had prepared slides that we weren't forgetting to show them, but understood. Thank you so much.
No, I appreciate you clarifying. And again, if we had a little bit more time, we would have put that together. And if we were to ever repeat this, and we'd be able to put that together for you. Again, in addition to readjusting our staffing and evaluating how we're staffed, we're also looking at adjusting our tactics to the particular crime trends. Some of these things the community will notice, and frankly, some of the things that the community won't notice. And we're doing that to be a little bit smarter than some of the emerging trends of the people that are committing those crimes. One of the things that I think that it's worth having a discussion on, and I think the council deserves to know, is we're having a lot of challenges with repeat offenders. You've heard Chief Axel say a number of times in his testimony that the department finds that a small amount of people commit a large majority or percentage of our crimes. There's a couple of reasons probably for that. Right now with the pandemic, there's currently a reduced capacity in our courts. And there's been some changes to the criminal justice policies. I can tell you stories about every crime type that we have, about patterns that are driven by people who are repeat offenders. Just last week, in fact, Councilmember Tolbert, you reached out to Chief Axtell about some burglaries that were happening in Highland Park, very rightfully so. I'm happy to say that we arrested a man who, after 6 attempted burglaries on one night, he got into a house on his 7th attempt, and we were able to arrest him during the commission of that crime. Unfortunately, the person that we arrested, he had, at the time of his arrest, he had 2 other pending pretrial dates for similar offenses in Ramsey County, which means we've caught him before doing the same thing. In addition to that, he has 7 prior felony convictions. So what we know from that and what we learn is that we have the ability to respond to in-progress crimes and get to a lot of these crimes and make an arrest at the time. But when there's some of the things that are going on with the criminal justice system right now, these folks are getting back out. We're kind of chasing the same people over and over and over. This person in specific his behavior is dangerous. He's demonstrated that he's willing to enter a house that's occupied. On the burglary that we talked to the council member about, he entered a house with 2 elderly people, and this is concerning to us. We had a couple of people charged with murder in 2020 that at the time that they committed those crimes, they were on supervised release and wearing an ankle bracelet. And now, although that's good for our investigative process, we can put people at the scene of a crime. It's sort of concerning to us that people who are committing violent crimes in the community are out to do more crimes. And I think this is a direct effect on some of the crime numbers that we're seeing now. I can say the same story. Yeah.
Just a quick pause, if you will. I see Mr. Tao and Ms. Naker both have a hand up, so if you wouldn't mind entertaining some questions along the path here. Mr. Tao.
Council President, I think Councilmember Necker had her hand up first, so she go ahead.
Oh, thanks, Councilmember Tao. I appreciate it. Assistant Chief Thomas, I really appreciate this presentation, and I want to let you get back to talking about the plan and the tactics that you're deploying in response to this increase in crime. But I do want to ask you, if you could, to say a little bit more. This repeat offenders is really troubling to me. It's something I've heard a lot about from my constituents and from your colleagues as well. And I know that we're hoping that this will not be the last time that we hear a presentation and have a conversation about this. I'm certainly hoping we can make this regular and invite folks from Ramsey County Attorney's Office and prosecutors, et cetera, to come and talk to us, because we know it's not just on your outstanding team. But I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit more about what some of those changes to the charging policies have been that are allowing you to catch people with ankle bracelets or people who have these multiple pending trials?
Sure. And Council President Brenmo and council members, thank you for the question. I think what I want to be very clear about is what I don't want to do is lie blame on somebody's feet here today. We're one part of the entire criminal justice system that we know is right now strained by the COVID pandemic. There's no doubt that there's diminished capacity with the court and its ability to handle the cases that are presented by us and charged by either the city attorney or the county attorney. So there's a lot of factors that go into the whole system that I'm also glad you'll get presentations from those offices, because I don't want to speak for them. What I can just tell you as we assess the crime that we see, there's been some policies with the jail where we put people in custody and the jail not wanting to hold people. It's allowing people to get out sooner than we would normally see. There have been some charging decisions based on different crime types. And again, I don't want to speak for our prosecutors. I think we can talk about what we see with some of, just for example, I would speak about drug offenders. So there's right now, we have a lot of people who we are arresting who are living in a sort of a drug cycle, whether that they're abusing or they're distributing. And we make arrests of these folks, and then they are not charged. And again, I'm not advocating for us to put people in jail for drug abuse. I guess what I'm advocating for is some of those policies might prevent us from getting people who are abusing drugs in front of the court, the drug court, so that they can maybe get the help that they need and break the cycle of living addicted and then committing crimes to sometimes maybe fund those addictions. And again, there's a lot of advocates that could speak about this much more elegantly than us, but these are some of the policies that we see where the policies, because of COVID or because of some of the other reform things in place, we see people just getting out sooner, and that means we're just chasing them sooner. And that's, again, there's a lot of probably discussion to be had on that topic. I just share it with the council so that you know that when the question comes to you or the question comes to us is, why aren't we capturing that person? We are, and oftentimes that's the case. I think we can point to that with a lot of our carjackings that are going on. They're repeat offenders. They're using the similar methods. And frankly, when we have a night where we have a number of carjackings, the first thing my investigators will do is go to see who was released from jail the day before. And that's one of the things that we're just noticing about the trends. So again, I don't want to blame anybody for what's going on. I think we're all part of the system together. It's just a trend that we're seeing, and it's one that I think we have to pay some attention to figure out how do we work through that.
All right, Mr. Tao. And I see you, Ms. Prince.
Thank you, Council President. Assistant Chief, thanks for your presentation. I'm just curious. I want to follow up on Councilmember Necker piece, and then I have a follow-up question to what I wanted to ask is when with repeat offenders, what do you think we should do, in your experience, to curb that, right? Like whether it's a policy change. I know you're respectful of other processes, but what is your recommendation in keeping these folks accountable?
Council President Brenmoen and Councilmember Tao, thank you. I'm not prepared to answer the question, to be honest with you. I think that we are in a partnership with our prosecutorial entities, and we should sit down in a partnership and probably talk those things out. I think that we can provide some data, and the county attorney and the city attorney are probably aware of these things also. I think we could see the same trend with catalytic converter thefts, and I know that of the 1,100 catalytic converter thefts that occurred last year, we made 75 arrests for people for that crime. And I know that we're doing some legislative changes to maybe help us with that. But the fact of the matter is we need to find a way to interrupt people's willingness or need to commit these crimes. And I'm not advocating for everybody to be in jail, but in our community, there are some people who have committed some real violent acts that get out in a very quick frame of time and then are committing another violent act. And if we were to look at and analyze in a case study some of the homicides that occurred in the city, I think we could point to people who had committed a violent act, got out, and before they settled that one, they're already committing another violent act. And unfortunately, tragically, it's ended up in the loss of life in some people in our city.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so to clarify, I think what I heard is that the burglary, the robbery, the carjacking, was those crime already happening and increasing prior to the pandemic?
Again, I've not looked at the data that far back. I can, and I can provide an answer about that, about when the increases started. Crime trends are things that are impacted by a number of different factors. Sometimes it's the weather that we're having. Sometimes it's other events that are going on in our city. So I think some more analysis would have to take place before I could answer that really intelligently.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then to my question, so in my experience, we've had carjacking, burglary, robbery, that happened in Ward 1, happened along the light rail, Frogtown, North End. I feel like they didn't get the same kind of media attention or profile as the same crime that happens in a more affluent neighborhood south of 94. And so can you explain our process and how the department solve these crimes? Are they prioritized differently, or how does that work?
Councilmember Brenmoen, Councilmember Tao, the prioritization that the department does is based on the crime type, not geographic area or who's the victim. We spend a great deal of time of prioritizing our resources on the crime type, and at different times of the year, when staffing levels are different or when trends are different, there's a whole number of factors that would consider what our clearance rates would be as to any particular time in the time of the year. So if the question is do Highland Park burglaries get more attention than those in Frogtown or any other part of the city, the answer would be no. Again, these are all evaluated when they come into the department. We look at solvability. We look at the number of factors that would help us get to a place where we can present the case to the city or county attorney. Whether the burglary happens in Highland Park or Frogtown, the same analysis would go on as to its solvability. That is there any evidence that exists? Are there witnesses? Is there physical evidence to be tested in the form of fingerprints or other types of forensic evidence? So there's analysis that goes on, but it's not based on region or victim.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and my last question, sorry, is how many inspector do we have working on burglary and robbery cases, and so that we can have a ratio of 1 inspector to 20 crimes or 4 crimes or whatnot?
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Tao, thank you for that question. The caseloads we talk about for our investigators are something that we analyze. And right now, a reality of the department is that some of the investigative caseloads for certain crime types are higher than we'd like them to be. But again, that's because we've prioritized more investigative resources towards violent crime. If you think of the triple homicide that took place tragically not too long ago, there was more than 100 people from the department that were assigned and working on that case in one capacity or the other. And I think the community would expect that. And when we do that and we get the swift result that we ended up with, we have to set other things aside. So as I talk about the investigative resources that we have, we would like to spend more time on some crime types such as criminal damages and thefts that occur, or sometimes burglary. And not all burglaries are the same. The one I spoke of a few moments ago involving Mr. McFarland, where he had several priors, that's a home invasion burglary, or a burglary of an occupied dwelling. That burglary might be a little bit different in our analysis as when we look at a garage burglary. So there's a lot of analysis that goes in, and it's all based on our ability to solve the crime and present the crime for charging.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tao. We have Ms. Prince and then Ms. Yang.
Thank you, Council President Brenmo. Chief, I'm really grateful that you're here. And obviously, the news is not good. I am absolutely struck, though, by the idea that we have just discussed, that through good police work, we're able to apprehend people who are committing carjackings and other violent crimes involving guns that they shouldn't have, and that they are going through a revolving door and they're back out on the street. I mean, it's just so totally unacceptable. And then when these crimes happen over and over, we obviously, as the St. Paul Police Department and the City of St. Paul and council members, are being called and saying, what are you doing about this? I have noticed this year, when we faced the huge increase in unsheltered homelessness, that we were able to create initiative with the county where we partnered in ways that we haven't before. And we have absolutely got to demand that everybody get out of their silos on these problems, because we can't have these dangerous people immediately going back on the street. I mean, I think that is, I hear it all the time, but I think hearing it in this setting and in this way, I think that's the big news here, that the county, that all of us who are elected officials, because there's a lot of elected officials at all the levels that have the ability to make laws and policy changes when it comes to this stuff. But we have got to start working across silos to solve this now. It's really terrifying out there. I just want to read you a paragraph from an email that I got today. This is somebody that just moved to my ward and is only about 5 blocks from me. And she said, a house down the street was burglarized. A person was stabbed with glass 6 houses down from me, close to the park. A neighbor 2 houses over had a standoff with SWAT a few weeks ago. My own dog was shot with a pellet or BB gun in the fenced yard. I don't have cameras, so I don't know who did it. And there are gunshots and drug deals happening on Old Hudson Road almost nightly. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. I don't know what to say to her. I've reached out to Commander Hallstrom, and we obviously have to talk to neighbors over there and get them looking out for each other, and we've got to add some patrols, and that may help. But I think that people are making decisions about investing in St. Paul. And these are issues for our businesses, for our apartment building owners. I heard from an apartment building owner who said there have been so much damage to the buildings from people trying to break in. And of course, by the time they call the police, there isn't any opportunity to really, there's no evidence. And that they are, I mean, the police are basically, and I'm guessing this is true, that in a crime that doesn't involve a person being hurt, that there really is unlikely to be any investigative resources put into those crimes. Is that the case?
Council President Bren Moen and Councilmember Prince, sometimes, unfortunately, sometimes there are a number of cases that we aren't able to get to. Again, we try to triage those based on their solvability. There's a lot of cases that we wouldn't solve even if we had an unlimited amount of investigators. Some cases just are not solvable, but there are a number of cases that we cannot get to that we'd like to if we had additional capacity. So we do the best we can to live up to what we think is the council, the city administration, and the public that we serve, how they would prioritize these crime types, and we focus on those that are most egregious and are most hurtful to people and have a true impact to people's lives. And so some of the lower level thefts, sometimes sometimes it's probably a very subjective term, but most likely we're not able to get to those unless that lower level crime or theft is tied to a whole string of them that might help us solve a larger crime problem. But sometimes these crimes individually don't rise to our ability to get to them.
Right. Well, I want to call out another thing you said, which is that our deployable officer level is now down to 570. And I want to point out that we didn't have a 2020 academy. We all had to make a tough decision with this budget. But I believe that we should have added cops. I believe we should have had a 2020 academy. I hope we have a 2021 academy. Do we know yet whether we're going to have a 2021 academy?
Council President Bren Moen, Councilmember Prince, I know Chief Axtell right now is working closely with the mayor's office on the 2021 academy and the answer of if we can do it and the timing of when. I don't have an answer for you on that.
Okay, thank you. And I do want to point out that if we don't have an academy, and we're at 570 now, and we have to hit our attrition number in the budget, that we are going to be at the lowest ebb ever that we've seen, I'm guessing, if you could confirm that, when we get to the summer month.
Council President Bren Moen, Councilmember Prince, the attrition, the expected attrition throughout the year, we would expect to get us to a lower number if we look at how we normally lose people throughout the year. That number could get to, and I think if I were to just use the testimony Chief Axtell provided in the past, that number could get us to about 540. That's a speculative number just because we don't know at what rate we will lose people. We know where we are today, and what I just would like to make the point that the decision to not have an academy in 2020, we know that the police department knows that there's a lot that went into that decision, and there's a lot of factors to that decision. And I just want you to have the confidence, and the council to have the confidence, in fact, the public to have the confidence that we've not thrown up our hands in defeat. We are working as hard as we can can, and we're trying to be as creative and resourceful as we can to use the resources that are available to us and to do the very best for the public that we have. And I think it's important to say that because we're not here trying to advocate that there's no way out. We're just doing the best that we can. And if we're talking about profit loss, if we're in the private industry or anything else, we're just sharing with you the realities of what we're facing right now.
And I hear that, and I don't mean to put you in an uncomfortable position, but I think a combination of that
Ms. Prince,
we're down on cops, and we're also arresting people who are immediately freed. It's kind of a bad combination. So I appreciate your responses.
And Ms. Prince, I'm sorry to interrupt there. I'm struggling a little bit with facilitating this conversation because I know that there's information that the assistant chief was trying to get through before we ask questions. And now everybody on the council has had their hand up with questions. And so I'm okay if we want to just devolve into questions. But I also think it would be helpful to understand. I think that some of the stuff is, we'll have a little bit more context if we can go through the presentation and then come back to questions. But if that doesn't work for people, I've also recognize also that we've had several people already talk, and so I don't want to cut anybody off. But if that would be possible, I think some of the things that you're planning to cover would help answer some of our questions, and at least put some context in there. So that would be my request: is that we can just get done with the comments that you were going to make. If there's questions to clarify, let's clarify them, and then go to back to hands up. And I know Nelsie had hands up, Jalali had hands up, Chris hands up. So I know a lot of people want to talk. But if that's okay, Ms. Jalali, you still have a hand up. Is that okay if we move forward for now?
Yeah, I guess that is a good point of clarification. Is there a bunch of presentation left and then we can just have at it because I...
No, I don't think there's a bunch of presentation left. In fact, I think that's one of the reasons why I thought it'd be helpful to just let the assistant chief finish the presentation, and then we can go back to questions.
Let's get through it, and then we'll move to the comments and questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that, folks, and I should have done that sooner. All right, assistant chief.
Council President Brenmoen, thank you. And I'll be quick here. There's just a couple of things left that I think that you've asked us to cover, and then I can be done. Again, just to reiterate what I said before, officers are doing everything that they can, and they're doing a great job. And I couldn't be more proud of the men and women that are out there taking calls and doing investigations. And again, we've not accepted a defeatist attitude. We are doing all we can, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that we're making a difference in a positive way for the city. What we want you and the city to know is that in addition to doing everything we can, we are working to take these issues head on. We are, as I said, changing our tactics. We are partnering with our other law enforcement agencies that are having similar problems, whether that's locally or nationally. Again, Chief Axtell's discussion out in Quantico right now is about these things that are going on within the country. We're using our federal resources where we can, and we're focusing on every possible efficiency that we can have so that we can make the biggest difference possible. Here's what we would ask of the public, because the public does have a role in the success for the city, I believe, and I believe that that's Mayor Carter's championed message, is that everybody has a role. And what we would ask is, if you know of people who are carrying guns illegally, please tell us so that we can possibly save a life. We would ask you to keep an eye on your neighborhood. We would ask you to connect with your neighbors. Be aware of what's happening in your neighborhood. And if you see something, call us. We will come. Please, I can't say this enough. Don't leave your car running unattended. We recorded last year 2,700 auto thefts. And a lot of those crimes were because people were leaving their car unattended outside. And we understand that it's cold. We understand people want to warm those up. But leaving them unattended is just an easy opportunity for someone to steal your car. With respect to the carjackings, we're asking that you really pay attention to your surroundings. Pay attention to your surroundings when you're driving to see if you're being followed. If you think that's the case, call 911 from your car. Be aware of your surroundings when you park your car. If something doesn't look right, follow your gut. and don't just step out and be an easy victim. If you're warming your car up and you have one of those cars that you can warm up from the house and it still stays locked and it needs a key to move, that's great. A lot of those cars have been the subject of some of the carjackings. People who are doing those are watching these cars warm up, and then when the owner comes out to the car, they're being surprised unexpectedly by the people who want to take the car, who have had a couple of minutes to think about what their plan is, and they're catching people that way. So if something doesn't feel right, we would ask that stay in the house, call. Just don't make it easy for the people that want to commit these crimes. Criminals are looking for easy targets. We're asking the public to help us with not being that. The department has a crime prevention unit. The crime prevention unit will take your call. They'll answer your email. They will come to your home and your business if you have specific questions on how to make your home safer or how to make your business safer. Their number is on our website, and we would ask you or encourage you to call if you have questions for them. And again, I would just finish up with saying, I know there was a lot of discussion so far about the repeat offenders. The message here was not to lay blame to other partners in our criminal justice system. It's just a trend that we're seeing right now and one we're trying to overcome. I will recap some of the numbers and statistics that I shared with you in a staff report, and I will make sure that you get that tomorrow. And I thank you for the time.
Thank you, Assistant Chief. We appreciate that. And thanks to my colleagues for just putting some of our questions on hold. I'll add to your list of things to do. A neighbor of mine had a garage door opener in his front in his car on the visor. You know, there's a visor clip for it, and that is something we strongly recommend, that you do not store your garage door opener in your car. It's an easy target for a thief to come take your garage door opener and then just press the button and access to everything in your garage. So that's something I did for years. I don't do it anymore after I heard that tip, but it happens from time to time, and just a reminder of an easy way that you can protect yourself and make it easier for the police. So Ms. Yang, you had your hand up previously, and so I'll go to you first, and then Ms. Jalali, and then Mr. Tolbert.
Thanks, Council President. Assistant Chief Thomaser, I have a couple of questions. I know last year we the council, we got a presentation from the police department showing, mapping out different hotspots for crime across St. Paul. I was wondering if you know or have any updates on whether those hotspot crimes are still the same, whether there's been any improvements, because I know that there have been some new initiatives implemented, for example, having more engagement on the grounds of people who are in the area to de-escalate and also decrease chances of crime happening. I'd love to hear about that. And then the second question I have is, I think you brought up a lot of really great ideas and certain changes that need to be made within our systems, especially our criminal justice system, which is much larger than just our St. Paul Police Department alone. And I was wondering, who is someone in the police department who is in charge of being the line of communication to other levels of government, like the county, and also talking to the Ramsey County Attorney's Office about certain policy changes that need to be made so that we can actually get the work going on that and try to pass these major changes that do need to occur. I'm thinking specifically about drug abuse, alcoholism, a lot of the different systemic issues that our communities face. It seems like it's so important to make sure that we are connecting them to social services. The whole idea around just locking people up and having that be a solution for things, to me, just isn't, it just doesn't make sense. And we've seen that doesn't work. And so we need to be pushing to connect people to services directly that will address and get to the root cause of why people are doing certain things that are harmful for them in the community. So I'd love to figure out whether there is someone in charge in the police department in having these really important conversations and pushing for change.
Council President Brenmoen and Councilmember Yang, thank you for the question. So first, your question was about hotspots, and so the department tracks where crimes are occurring, and we do it by crime type, and we can watch these things change throughout the year. There can be a particular event that occurs in the city where all of a sudden we'll have a spike of auto thefts, or we'll have a spike of some other type of crime, and some of those are driven by just events that occur. With respect to the work that's going on in the city, I don't know that the data yet shows the impacts of some of the investments that the city has made in efforts other than the police department. There's probably a lot of analysis to be had on that. And I know that there's a work group that's being led by the mayor's office that is looking at exactly that. And as I sit here today, I'm not prepared to give the answer on that. And I apologize for that. If there's specific data related to that, I can talk to that team and get that back to you. But I don't have that answer as I sit here today. But I think it's a very valid question. But with respect to coordinating with the department and our other partners, the department, I think, is so wide in the missions that we have. There's so many different things we do, whether it's focused on solving a particular type of crime, or if it's focused on partnering in the area of mental health or homelessness or something like that. There's no one place that you can go to for every answer. So I think if we were to speak more granular on specific issues, I think that there's a place in the department where we would partner with the right resources on the outside, because I don't think there's just one community group that can speak to all those problems either. So I think we have to look at some of these challenges individually and come up with a work group to try to find the appropriate solutions. I, like you, I'm not advocating that everybody has to be in jail, but I do think that right now there's a challenge that we're trying to figure out how to work through, and I'm sure that there'll be conversations to be had with our prosecutorial partners. I know that there's advocates, and I know that there's other groups that are working toward solving some of these same problems. All I'm sharing today with you is when the question came to me is, what are your trends? What are you seeing? Why isn't it stopping? That's one of the concerns that we see and that we're facing every day, and we, like you, want to find an answer for it.
Thank you. And Ms. Yang, just specifically to the hotspots, are you referring to the places that the Community First Public Safety Work Group had identified 5 different areas in the city that they were pouring in different resources? Is that what you're referring to, or was more just the?
Yep.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And I agree. I think we mentioned maybe at our org committee meeting that getting an update from the Community First Public Safety task force and understanding if these hotspots are still hotspots, if the work that we've invested in those areas has made an impact, or if it's no change, it is something. I think that's one of the benefits of having those tangible spots identified. And I know that Ms. Houston is working on getting that scheduled, and I believe they're penciled in for March. I believe I might be making that up, but I know that we are expecting a report back on that very thing. So I 100% support getting an update on that and understanding where those investments are, if those investments are paying off, or if it's time to shift them or what have you. So I appreciate that. And just clarifying to the Assistant Chief, I know that sometimes we look at maps of the whole city and know where hotspots are, and I think they're 2 separate points, but also that have clear overlays as well. So Ms. Jalali and then Mr. Tolbert.
Thank you. Yeah, so, I have a lot of reactions to the information presented here. I really appreciate you being here to share this information with us. I think that, to me, the big news is actually that as we're all aware, we're in a global pandemic, which has wreaked devastation on our communities. We have had very little support for 11 months now getting through it. We are finally starting to turn the tide, but unsurprisingly, in the meantime, crimes of desperation and crimes related to quarantine and the deterioration of the social systems we depend on to prevent these things are up. And it is both unsurprising to me and also just very evident that is actually what is driving what's happening. I feel like even despite there being a global pandemic, we received a presentation on crime trends, I think 2 budget cycles ago now, and we continue to belabor the size of the police force, but we looked at all of our crime trends in context, and it didn't actually really show a clear correlation between how many officers we had, what our head count was, what the quote unquote diminished workforce or not was, and what the rate of crimes were. And when you look around our world without doing research, without having a task force, we know there are communities where people in those communities never have to call the police. they never experience a crime and they never commit a crime because they are cared for. They have access to housing that is permanent and stable. They have jobs that help them make a living. They have people around them supported to be able to care for them if they go through a rough spot. They have good education, and the list goes on and on and on. And right now, we're seeing actually a decrease in group-related homicides in the city from 2019 to 2020. But this is obscured by the fact that we have an uptick in domestic and family violence. And to me, that's not the case for adding officers or looking at how to be more punitive in our justice system. That's look at the logical fallout of what we've heard about all year with domestic violence and quarantine and the pressures on women who can't get out and who are stuck in these households with men who are beating them. And then what do we do to help folks get out of that? We should be funding those services. We actually are seeing lots of crimes that happen because guess what? Kids have nowhere to go and are in and out of school, are in a combination of online learning or something else or both, are increasingly frustrated. Their parents are going through things they've never gone through before. And yeah, so I'm not surprised that there are probably teenagers stealing catalytic converters. Like, none of this is stuff that should surprise us. It's not good. We have to do more. But we aren't going to actually make a difference until we change how we funded all of these structures. And I guess I'm just disappointed by some of the rhetoric that this is unique or not part of an absolutely structural collapse of our society that the pandemic has exposed. And I'm really hoping that we look at the things that would solve the questions raised by council members today. The reason that a cop can't get to a call that's urgent in Frogtown or Highland or anywhere is that we don't have an alternative public safety workforce that isn't cops that can come deal with all the non-urgent things. That's why the mayoral commission that I'm on is looking at 4s and 5s and studying things like an Office of Violence Prevention to scale up the investments we've already made, which, by the way, are like 1 bajillionth of the investment we've made in police. So I just want all that to sink in because I am really tired of these presentations where we just come and talk about what we've been doing and it's like we don't want to learn what we can do differently. And then we wrist string and act like it's a big mystery. It's not. What we want to be true can be possible. We have to fund our world differently. And I just can't let this presentation pass without saying that. I appreciate the chance to share my thoughts.
Thank you. I see Mr. Tao, Ms. Naker. I know Mr. Tolbert, his hand is down now. And I will just say, I appreciate your comments, and I don't think that the point of this conversation here today was to pile on anything. I think really just two people are asking questions, and this is an opportunity to cut out the middleman and hear directly from our police department what they're seeing and what actions are being taken and things that we can do to help ourselves. I agree. I mean, what I heard the assistant chief say about not, if we don't charge folks on drug related issues, then they don't go to drug court and they don't get the help they need. So, we're identifying some of these systems that are disconnected. And I think that the real question, I heard Ms. Prince say this too, is like, how do we get folks out of their silos and starting to, connect these dots that you've just identified, Ms. Jalali, and so on. And so I think this is, it was not intended to frustrate anybody. It's more just to get some information and get a understanding of where we're at and where the holes still are and what we can do to improve it. And I think very rightly pointing out in the middle of not even in the middle, at the leggy end of a global pandemic where we're all worn out and over it and tired of being inside and so on and so forth. So it's at least my intention in facilitating this conversation is to get that information out to the public. Mr. Tao, Ms. Naker, and then Ms. Prince.
Thank you, Council President. I want to acknowledge what Councilmember Jalali has said, and I don't want to minimize what she's saying. I also am, the way I see it, that it's not one or the other. I think it's a little bit of working on both track, because as the assistant chief has said, and this is something that has been said before the prior to the pandemic, is that we have repeat offender. And so these are folks who aren't just are in a desperate situation, and maybe they are, but they're repeat offenders. And so they're criminal, their history of committing crimes against property and against people. the carjacking and violent crimes against people in St. Paul happens prior to the pandemic, and I know because it happens in my ward, and I have regular crime reports with the Western districts. Also, I am a victim of catalytic converter that was stolen on my vehicle, and it was prior to the pandemic, and so these things do exist, and so I think that it's not either or. I think we have to be realistic in our strategy in preventing crime at the forefront, and then also working on a longer strategy to root out the cause of crime, which is poverty and structural racism and other ism that happens in our society. And so I just want to point out that there are repeat offenders, there are criminals that are out there intent to hurt and to steal from other folks and to victimize the constituents and that we serve. And so those are my points.
Thank you, Mr. Tao. Ms. Naker, then Ms. Prince.
Thanks, Council President. I also appreciate what Councilmember Jalali pointed out, and I agree. I mean, I think the crime increase that we're seeing is absolutely related to the pandemic. It is not a coincidence that cities all across the country are seeing the exact same increases, in many cases worse increases than we're seeing, and in very similar types of crimes. I just saw a report about carjackings in Chicago and Washington, D.C. and New Orleans. So this is definitely not unique to St. Paul, and it's definitely not because of anything we're doing or not doing. There are bigger factors at play. But at the same time, people need to feel safe in our city, and that needs to be a top priority for us as elected officials. And we need to listen and not be dismissive when people say, and they're saying it, that they are feeling afraid. And so I'm really, really glad that we're having this conversation. And I think we need to acknowledge that there are bigger factors at play and do whatever we can do to help our neighborhoods be safe and feel safe. A couple of things that I think Assistant Chief Thomaser would be really helpful data points for us to share, and I hope that we can, when we get your report, we can make it public as well. You talked about the number of officers deployable, and we've talked a lot about these numbers and how sworn strength and deployable are both different from actually deployed, right, and out on the street at any time. I know there are minimum numbers for every shift that will be deployed. One of the conversations we had during our budget process last year was about the department's prioritizing of the numbers who would be out on the street, that would be the priority for where officers would be, even when we had fewer total number of officers than normal. So I'm curious about the number of officers actually deployed on shifts this year versus last year versus average. I think that would be really helpful to know rather than deployable, which doesn't always relate to who's actually on the street at a given time. I also would love to know a little bit more about the statistics here and across the country. I think it would be helpful to see, just put this in context a little bit more as to what's going on nationwide and what we're seeing here in St. Paul, if we have those. And then finally, a question. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about, I know some of the tactics that you're deploying you can't share for very good reason. Are there any tactics that you can share? I think what I'm hearing from people is this question about what are we doing differently than we normally do in response to what we're seeing, right? So for example, I know this summer in downtown St. Paul, one of the tactics that you used to great effect was to sort of surge into areas. So it didn't matter how many total officers we had, but it did matter how many officers folks were used to seeing at a certain time in a certain neighborhood at other times, and kind of changing that dynamic really made a difference downtown. So can you talk a little bit about some of those kinds of tactics, if you can talk about them, that you're employing?
Yeah, Council President Brenmoen and Councilmember Naker, thank you for the question. The tactics that I would talk about is the way that I think the way the department is operating is the way we are communicating between units and the way that we are sharing resources. So when you talk about the surge that goes on right now, if we were to have an incident of shots fired or a group of shots fired that are occurring in a certain area, we are then taking an investigative unit like the gang unit and putting them in that area and doing that surge. And we're doing that surge in a combination of different ways, both very visibly, but also not visibly, because where the crimes are starting to show a pattern that are going on in a particular area, we kind of want to be in the area to see if we can catch that and be there for when it happens so that we we can get there or be there while it happens rather than showing up after the fact. So we are utilizing technology in some of our tactics. And what are we doing different? We are utilizing some of the CCTV resources available to us. We're using some of the other private business camera systems to us. We have a lot of people registered with some of the private network camera systems that are sharing their camera data that we are utilizing in our investigative techniques to make sure, or to very much as possible, find evidence that exists to help us present cases with stronger evidence to be charged. We are looking at some deployment methods right now related to our carjackings and some of the other higher profile crimes. We have a lot of commercial burglaries that are occurring, as you're well aware. And so we are looking at the way that we will staff and deploy into those areas to respond to that. Some of the particular techniques I would rather not share, and I know you probably would understand why, but we are just trying to adjust the normal business way that we do business into being sort of atypical to how we used to do it. The gang unit would normally before be the investigative arm that would work towards solving crimes. We're now making them part of the solution. I was driving in this morning and there was a carjacking that occurred this morning, and the officers that were out working with the victim. In fact, a great story is that we got that car back for that victim within a few minutes. Right, it worked out well. We weren't able to make an arrest, but we were able to get the car back for the victim. And but right away, I heard the gang officers on the radio coordinating with the street officers because they're trying to attach MOs. So rather than waiting for an investigator to get the crime a couple days down the road after all the reports are filed, investigators are now proactively reaching out to the street officers and coordinating right then and there when the crime happens to try to improve our chances of making an arrest at the time the crime is committed. And we know at a lot of our clearance rates, that rate is mostly driven, especially with auto thefts, that's driven by our ability to make a crime or make an arrest when the crime's committed. So we are adjusting the way that we work in those regards. Some of the things that we're going to do to identify or to locate some of the offenders, again, those are things I won't share, but we are stepping out of the way that the department normally works to do those sort of things. And I think if you're in the neighborhood and you start seeing people knocking on your door and they say they're from the gang unit and they want to talk to you about the shots fired that took place the night before, that would be a change that the public would see from our response.
Thanks. And just as a quick follow-up, I really appreciate you saying that about the possibly invisible surge, because I think what I hear a lot from people is, well, there's all this crime and then I don't see anybody. And I saw more cops yesterday than I see today. And I think that your point about how often that is strategic, you're there, but you're not visible in order to prevent rather than just respond is really helpful. Thank you.
If I could address one other point related to your question, with respect to staffing on patrol, the patrol districts have a staffing model that we follow, and that model requires a certain number of patrol deployable officers, and we've used that model now for a couple of years. And as the department's staffing has shrunk and grown because of academies, we have always tried to adhere to that same staffing model. Even today, we're still doing that. That staffing model remains intact, so that we can still deploy what we would consider a minimal amount of officers that are required per shift to make sure that we have adequate coverage for the city and the people who might be victims of crime, but it also allows us to make sure that we can afford those first responders time off so that they can get their breaks and rehab and spend time with their families. And so we're still sticking with that deployment model. As we shrink the department, as openings occur in the department, and if you looked at the department staffing now where the openings are, they're not in patrol. We're holding them in other parts of the department because we understand that we have a responsibility first and foremost to respond to crimes when they're occurring on the street and answer 911 calls.
Thank you. Ms. Prince.
Yeah, I thank you so much to my colleagues and to Chief Thomaser for being here today. And what I want to say is I think first and foremost, I think the public is wanting to hear from us more about what they can do, what they should be doing, and what's going on in the community. And I really believe that we're moving in the right direction. With today, this wasn't on our agenda. I think it was very timely that it was put on the agenda. It's very helpful. As I told you last week, I went to the BRC meeting, the Business Review Council, last week so that I could hear about the 911 study that's being done through the Citizens League. I think we need a mid-study report at the City Council on that. The public doesn't go to the Business Review Council. And at the Business Review Council meeting, I learned from the head of the Citizens League that the public input to the surveys that they're doing that is supposed to inform their work is not getting much input. And we know the public is deeply concerned about crime in our city and will likely have some very strong feelings about how we handle low priority 911 calls. So I think that we need to connect more with the public. We need to invite their input. I also want to say, when it comes to our community first public safety efforts, I am very supportive. I believe we have decided that we would have a quarterly report on those. I don't know if we've scheduled those or not, but I want to recommend that we do that. But I just learned that the head of Healing Streets is no longer in that position. I don't know when a new head of that program will be appointed. I had a meeting with the Awakenings program. It has a capacity right now with the staff it has of 80 children, and they are only serving 20. And they are trying hard to recruit young people to participate in it. We know we have hundreds of kids that aren't getting the help they need in the community. So if the issue is that we don't know how to recruit kids to the Awakenings program, let's figure it out. But we need to communicate more about this. And to Ms. Naker's point, the public is frightened. They're questioning their investment in St. Paul. They're looking around about whether they can keep their business here. And we want to give them confidence that we're all talking together, that we're working together, that we're using our 17 district councils and our incredible number of effective business associations to communicate all the information that's needed for everybody to be on the alert and working together to make our city safer. We've always been a city that could figure out how to solve our problems. And we need to take this opportunity when the public is crying out for information. And I want to say one more thing about crime in our communities. Areas of poverty are victimized by crime at a far greater rate than wealthier neighborhoods. Let's recognize that, because the catalytic converter problem in my neighborhood, where many of my neighbors, most, do not have garages, their cars are on the street. That's where they get stolen. And a catalytic converter being stolen from a lower income renter is a far bigger problem than for a homeowner in a more a neighborhood that is of higher people with higher incomes. So I just want to be clear that when we're trying to solve crime problems, all of us know homelessness is up, joblessness is up, people are in terrible crisis. But that doesn't mean that we can't talk about how to keep them safer in the places they live and help them feel safe and help them feel connected to our city. So I appreciate the fact that I feel like this council is now making a commitment to do much better communication on this issue. And finally, we don't have a communication staff as the city council. The mayor's office has a communication staff. There are messages that need to be going out. When it comes to, we've had 6 murders this year, 4 of them have been children. And Councilmember Tao and I and Council President Brenmona and I have been in meetings to talk about domestic abuse and domestic violence and the need for all of us to get on social media and provide the information that people need if they know somebody in trouble or if they themselves are in trouble. So we all have to figure out, working with the mayor's office, how we can do more effective communication on making our city safer. Thanks.
Mr. Tolbert.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chief Thomaser. I appreciate you joining our council meeting today, particularly at short notice. I think a lot of all of us here appreciate hearing from you, and I think many members in the community appreciate hearing from you directly as well. And I know you know this because we've met, and I, have talked to the chief about it and other leaders in the Western District and others. But from the community meetings that I've had and that I've attended, from a lot of the personal conversations that I've had with constituents and neighbors, and just my personal observation as a resident of Highland Park and the city, I just thought it would be helpful if I articulate, what I'm hearing and what people are feeling. And I want to pass that on. Like I said, I know I've articulated this and said this to you before, but I think in a public forum it makes sense. Particularly the increase in the certain types of crime that seem more brazen, seemingly random nature of them. It is really unsettling and very scary for many people in our community. Generally, people in our city, I think, expect that if they're a law-abiding citizen, they should be able to feel safe. I think the frequency that we've seen this new brazen type of crime, particularly the carjackings and others, and the seemingly random nature and the victims, getting into their car in their garage right after work in the bright of day, it has changed that feeling. And I know your officers know that because they've heard it as well from the community, and I suspect they would feel it too if they were in that position. And I would agree. I mean, we're seeing this nationally, we're seeing it regionally, we're seeing it citywide, not just Highland Park, but citywide. And as was discussed by many of my colleagues earlier, there are many reasons for it. Most are pandemic related, in my opinion. If we can solve the pandemic or move beyond the public health crisis that we're currently in, it helps solve some of the issues we're having with the courts, that we're having with jobs, that we're having with diversion programs, that we're having with the social net that people naturally have when people can get together. And it's just another reason for the absolute urgency of getting this pandemic under control as soon as possible and moving on. But regardless of the reasons of why these we might see this increase in crime or the nature of crime or whatever that may be, if you're a victim of one of these crimes or you're fearful that you could be a victim, that's very scary, and you are a victim. And what's especially troublesome is the involvement of guns in quite a few of these carjackings too. And I will say, that is not acceptable in any neighborhood in St. Paul. That's not acceptable in our city, and frankly, it shouldn't be acceptable anywhere in this country. I believe that any person, whether you live in St. Paul, whether you work in St. Paul, or if you're just visiting St. Paul and you're a law-abiding person, you should be able to feel safe. And I think what we know is many don't. I do also want to take the opportunity to publicly commend. I've worked most closely with the Western District leadership, currently Senior Commander Legault, and prior to him, Senior Commander Anderson. And I appreciate they've been so willing to not only continue to talk, continue to focus on as you articulated in the citywide plan, focus on the most dangerous and the most violent crimes and attempt to solve those and get those people off, catch those people and stop them. And they've also been very generous with their time in terms of joining public safety meetings that I've hosted, joining me at business associations or district councils and others. And I'm really grateful for that. And also I think that their plan and response is appropriate and it's appreciated. I think part of the reason, at least why I thought it was important to have a chief from headquarters here is because I think, many of us know that the police department and the chief told me this when I met with him a couple weeks ago, that the department is responding accordingly to the trends that they see, and articulated both that there are things that you will see, patrols and other things, and those might be increased depending on the trends. But there's many things also that, as you responded to Councilmember Nager, there's many things that are being done that we don't necessarily see, and that's why you don't want us to see it, because they're working either as an investigator, undercover, or whatever that means. But I think for people to hear the citywide plan from you directly here today is really helpful. I think, a lot of people, because of some of the things that have happened in this country over the last 4+ years, have some lack of faith that government's doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I think you articulating that, Western District Command leadership articulating that to our community, and as well as us as city leaders and electeds articulating that to the community, can help ensure that, we are paying attention to this, we are doing what our job is, and that's public safety. And I think at the end of the day, and this well, people want the crime to stop. People want people who are committing these crimes to be held accountable and eventually get the help that they need, so that they are off that path. And quite frankly, at the end of the day, I think anyone who is law-abiding wants to be able to feel safe in this city, and that's a feeling that I think every person in the city of St. Paul should be able to feel. And I know that our collaboration together and our continued relentlessness to stop what we're seeing right now will help us get there. So I appreciate you being here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tolbert. Mr. Tao.
Thank you, Council President. I think one of my last point I want to make is that from a conversation I had earlier today with Councilmember Prince and Councilmember Yang, and from this conversation is we spoke a lot about facts. We spoke a lot about what's happening in our city and the pandemic. And I think it's fair that constituents are looking for a solution. I think they understand what the facts are, but we are looking for a solution. And I hope that other municipal partners who have come to the table, and if we need to make real tough decision to maintain the peace of mind that folks have, to have a peace of mind in the city, then we got to make those tough decisions. At the same time, be proactive in trying to prevent these sort of crime and making sure that folks have food on the table and folks have jobs. All of those they coexist, but we need solution, and I think the constituents are waiting for a solution.
Thank you, Mr. Tao. Thank you so much for joining us on short notice here today, Chief Thomas. We really, really do appreciate this conversation, and it's been wide-ranging. I was going to say that we keep noticing or acknowledging that one of the silver linings of COVID is the opportunity to have folks come in and easily present to us, but I realize it's easy for us to sit here and listen, and I really appreciate the fact that you have taken questions on the fly for over an hour here. But I think you can recognize that we're sharing the concerns of our community members, as Mr. Tolbert mentioned, and we're also recognizing that we are interested in kind of a shift on how we invest in people on the front end and try to prevent crime before it happens. And also recognizing that when you make those changes in a subtle way, we don't get the results you're looking for, and go back to being fearful about the crime on the back end. And so we just have to double down on our commitment to reduction of crime on the front end. And I do really appreciate as well understanding where we are today, where some of the challenges are, and things that we can do to protect ourselves as community members. So I appreciate that so much. I will also say that to my colleagues, we can continue to use this venue as an opportunity or as a place to communicate with the community and with each other and with other departments, municipalities, and leaders. And it sounds like there are at least a few folks that we could bring in going forward, perhaps someone from the county attorney's office, somebody from the sheriff's office, and get an understanding of what challenges are being faced there as well, and help. If we can't totally break down the silos, we can at least bring the conversation with the silos and start working on on connecting those conversations in a meaningful way. I know everyone sometimes says their heads down solving problems, and it's really our role to convene these conversations and figure out how to make those connections. So I'm committed to that as well, and we'll use this venue, as I mentioned, to invite other leaders in our community to help share their challenges and adjustments that they're making. And you know, as we always say, it's good to hear these things now, well in advance of the budget. So that's my commitment. And again, so grateful to you, Assistant Chief Thomaser. It's been great to hear from you today, and we thank your officers, the folks out on the street. It's very cold, and just imagining doing some of this work with the biting cold is very challenging, and I appreciate you acknowledge that folks need a chance to recharge as well. So we hope people are taking care of themselves, and know that the council is appreciative of the work that they're doing every day.
Council President Brent Mullen and council members, thank you for allowing me to be here today. I would just, if I could, a lot of things were said since I've last spoken, and I just wanted to clarify just one or two things. And one is my goal wasn't to come here to speak about policy. I know that there's a lot of discussion about how to solve problems and how to budget the city, and that wasn't my goal. I was invited to talk about what are the trends that we're seeing and what are the realities that we're facing, and I was only trying to provide a factual account of that. So if anyone was offended by the rhetoric, I just want to make sure that the purpose of me being here, as I understood it and tried to accomplish, was that we want the community to know that no matter if you're a victim of a violent home invasion or a robbery or a carjacking, or if someone steals the grill off your deck and it's just a theft, the police department cares equally. And we don't want people to think that we don't care because we can't get to some crimes. I think it's just important for us to be transparent and say that we don't have the capacity to get to some. So whether or not we talk about how to staff the department or how many officers are, the reality is there's just more work to be done. And so we just don't want the community to think that we've stopped caring if the first time they need the police department is because someone took something from their property and then the police department doesn't give them the response that they're expecting. So I would be happy to come back anytime that the council asks. I'll try to include some of the points that were asked of me for the report. And again, would just like to say that the police department that you have cares, and the men and women that are out there, the ones that walk into these buildings where they have these dead children or other horrific scenes, we worry about them, and we appreciate your support.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Item number 8, second reading of ordinance 21-7, amending and replacing ordinance 10-779 and authorizing the issuance of general obligation library refunding bonds of the Public Library Agency in order to achieve debt service savings. This ordinance is laid over to February 17th for third reading public hearing. Item number 9 is first reading of ordinance 21-10, creating chapter 223 of the legislative code related to guaranteed income program. This ordinance is laid over to February 17th for second reading. Item number 10, resolution public hearing 21-21, approving the application of Kraus Anderson Construction Company and Ramsey Company for a sound level variance for the 2383 University Apartments construction project from February 11th through March 21st.
All right, this is a public hearing, and we have held a public hearing online and over the phone, transcribed over the phone. I know that Barb McGonigal is here to answer any questions. I just do want to acknowledge that there are several emails from community members in the public hearing on Legistar for folks. Obviously, you have that in front of you, but just to draw attention to folks who are watching that there was quite a few comments. Ms. Jalali, did you need a report or?
I don't believe I need a report. I was going to make a motion, and so if people have questions, I can hold for that.
Okay, are there any questions? All right, Ms. Jalali.
Thank you. So thank you for everyone who's contacted our office about this sound level variance. This is a construction project happening at the corner of Raymond and University. It's the old bank lot that is finally turning into housing. It's happening in an intersection also that is actually, I think, one of the most dense intersections in the area of the city I represent. It's both historic businesses and a whole thriving small store community right there at the light rail station and intersection. And then there's also multiple 4 to 6 to 10 story apartment buildings. There's Seal High Rise, there's C&E Flats. There's going to be more neighbors right at that corner. And there's a lot of residents, and they're also all home all the time right now working because of COVID. And so I think it's kind of a unique node for the project to be happening at. A lot of the feedback that our office received was about the 7 a.m. start time for construction. And I do think that given the unique location of the site and just the wide range of folks that are there, that while I really want the project to proceed, I don't want to not grant the sound level variance. I think it's important. It's a basic part of the construction project. It's also pretty routine. I do think, and we have spoken to the project team about adjusting it to start at 8 a.m. just to provide a little bit more assurances and response to the feedback gotten while not significantly impairing the project at all or what's happening on the work site. So I was going to just lay all that out today and offer that as a friendly amendment to the sound level variance conditions and see if our colleagues would accept that. I hope that this is workable, and we have worked to communicate with all partners about this to make sure there's at least some responsiveness, given that I do think it warrants a little bit of accommodation given where the site is happening exactly and what I think is actually kind of a unique location and situation. So I hope this is reasonable to all, and if people have questions, happy to talk more about it.
Thank you, Ms. Jalali. And just as author of the amendment, you can, or of the resolution, you can make that change. And you're proposing to 8 o'clock as opposed to 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
For that sound level variance. And I'll speak in support of that and just say I appreciate all the thought around the location and the challenges it brings. I was talking to your legislative aide, Mr. Pravretsky, this morning, and saying the challenge with these projects always is, the earlier they can start and the longer they can go in the day, the quicker their project gets done. But on the other hand, you have to live. And so it's always that balancing act. And I feel like that extra hour is very reasonable for the people who have to live there. And hopefully the project will get completed and on to the next phase there very quickly. So I would speak in support as well and appreciate your that thoughtful adjustment. Any other comments? All right, so moved as amended to include 8 a.m. No further discussion. Roll call.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang, Aye. Jalali,
Aye.
Council President Bredmon.
Aye, and I should have said close the public hearing and approve, sorry.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted as amended to change it to an 8 a.m. start. Item number 11, resolution public hearing 21-23, recognizing $750,000 in available fund balance in 2021 in the Mayor's Office Grant Fund, and then transferring the Public Works Grant Fund for electric charging hubs.
All right, and this is a public hearing. We've taken comments online and over the phone transcribed. Is there any one who needs a report or has questions on this item? Seeing none, Ms. Yang moves to close the public hearing and approve. Roll call.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince, Councilor,
Aye.
you're on mute.
Aye.
Thank you. Tao,
Aye.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Council President Bredmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item number 12, ordinance 21-3, granting the application of NBH Holdings LLC to rezone the property at 1350 Arcade Street and 835 Clear Avenue from R4 one family residential to T2 traditional neighborhood and amending chapter 60 of the legislative code pertaining to the zoning maps.
And I know Mr. Dermody is here. If folks have questions, are there any questions on this one on this ordinance? Okay. And this has been a public hearing. We've taken comments online and over the phone transcribed. So seeing no questions and no discussion, Ms. Yang moves to close the public hearing. Roll call.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the ordinance is laid over to February 17th for final adoption. The legislative hearing officer recommends adoption of the following resolutions as no objections to these recommendations were received. Item 13, RLHTA 20-672, 1552 Arlington Avenue East. Item 14, RLH VBR 21-5, 1693 Beach Street. Item 15, RLH SAO 21-6, 1496 Charles Avenue. Item 18, RLH TA 20-673, 1248 Farrington Street. Item 20, RLH RR 21-5, 655 Jessamine Avenue East. Item 21, RLH VBR 21-6, 1118 Margaret Street. Item 22, RLH TA 20-669, 791 Minnehaha Avenue West. Item 23, RLH TA 21-93, 441 Mount Ida Street. Item 24, RLH TA 21-89, 749 Sims Avenue. Item 26, RLH TA 20-678, 2233 University Avenue West. Item 29, RLH AR 20-160, securing and or emergency boarding services. Item 30, RLH AR 20-161, collection of fire certificate of occupancy fees. Item 31, RLH AR 20-162, excessive use of inspection or abatement services. And item 32, RLH AR 20-163, graffiti removal services. And again, the motion is to adopt.
So moved by Mr. Tao. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearings are closed and the resolutions are adopted. For the following items, no objection to the legislative hearing officer's amended recommendations was received, and therefore she recommends amendment and adoption. Item 19, RLH TA 20-631, 959 Hudson Road. Item 25, RLH RR 21-6, 1004 Thomas Avenue. Item 27, RLH RR 20-32, 901 York Avenue. And item 28, RLH AR 20-159, collection of vacant building registration fees. And again, the motion is to amend and adopt these items.
All right, so moved by Ms. Yang. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Aye.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearings are closed and the resolutions are adopted as amended. For the following item, the legislative hearing officer's recommendation is contested and additional testimony from the appellant is in the record. Item 16, RLH TA 20-670, 1525 Theater Street, and we do have a staff report.
All right. Welcome, Ms. Mormond.
Thank you, Council President. My staff report on this will be relatively brief. This is a vacant building fee that has come about because there was a fire in the structure back in May of 2020. During the time since then, the family has been living in a rental property, and they, in the follow-up letter that they sent to the council, you've seen that they talk about the difficulty of covering expenses for the rental property that they're living in, continuing to pay the mortgage, and the impact of COVID on their income. Most notable, I think, in the letter that is attached that you've seen is that the insurance company has not paid them anything yet. It says our home insurance responses are also delayed and we have not received reimbursement for any out-of-pocket additional living expenses. So that is really concerning, you know, when the fire happened in May and here we are in February. This vacant building fee would normally be something that the fire insurance would cover, you know, so it is not out of the ordinary for this type of thing to be filed. The family is, of course, legitimately concerned given their interactions with the insurance and where they're at with it. Based on that correspondence, I would like to amend my recommendation. My recommendation that's currently on the record is ratification of the assessment. I would like to amend it to make that assessment payable over a period of 5 years in the event everything goes south and sideways with the insurance company, but also ask the council to continue the public hearing on this through October 13th. My thinking is that by October 13th, there may be some better resolution with the insurance company. We as a city may have been able to better communicate the vacant building fee part of this. And it also means that between now and October, interest would not continue to accrue on this assessment while the matter is being resolved. So basically keep the hearing open. Let's keep seeing if we can get some better information for this family and not have an invoice forthcoming pending hopeful resolution with the insurance company in the interim. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them.
All right. Are there questions for Ms. Mormond? And I don't see questions, but I will just share that I really appreciate the thoughtfulness and the work done on this particular case. And I will say to my colleagues, it feels like from time to time, and I mentioned this to Ms. Mormon today, that from time to time we run into these issues where our community members have suffered from a fire, which is devastating. It's scary. You lose your stuff. You can lose your pets. And insurance companies really drag their feet on resolving claims. And we have properties in neighborhoods that are burnt out next to other homes. They smell bad. They're a nuisance. They're easy to break into. Their kids can get into them. Very dangerous. And while the insurance company is figuring out whatever they have to figure out, I mean, there was a fire. I don't think it's that complicated. People are uprooted and living in, transitional housing, maybe a hotel. Sometimes they have to go get a lease. And I'm curious, and I know Ms. Mormon is going to just kind of dip her toes into this and see if she can figure out if there is if there's anything we can do on a municipal level to force insurance companies to get these residential fire cases and commercial fire cases resolved quickly. It's just not fair to anybody involved. And they're not living the life. So I just it feels like it comes up across our wards from time to time, and just want to I support the motion as it was presented. I know this is in Ward 6, but just acknowledging that there seems like there has to be something we can do to help people that are in this situation, because they're already they've kind of been the victim of a fire, and now they're the victim of an insurance company, and meanwhile their neighbors are victims of that burned out building. So just food for thought as we plunder through the many puzzling questions that are before us in 2021. I just wanted to throw yet another iron in the fire. So I would speak in support. Any other discussion on the motion or on the recommendation, or does anyone else have questions rather? Ms. Yang.
Thanks, Council President. Thanks for your comments. I have two things to say right off the bat. Marcia, thank you for your recommendation. I am in full support of it. And I want to say thanks for the dedication you have in finding a solution and just like being really flexible with the family. I'm also really grateful that the family is also really responsive too, and that they've been really transparent and honest with everything that's happening to them. Last year alone, I know at least 3 families who have had fires in their homes. Everything was completely destroyed, and it's so devastating. And so to think of the situation in which the family here is in, and that insurance companies are holding up the money that they actually need to be able to care for themselves and their family, like it's completely devastating. And so I do support the recommendation, and ask you all to support it as well. And moving forward, like if any of you have had similar situations where your constituents have had issues with their insurance companies, I would love to partner with you in figuring out what we can do to keep on supporting our constituents and serving folks in our wards so that they don't have to go through this again. So thanks for the compassion and the dedication you have for our family here in Ward 6.
So Ms. Yang would accept the recommendation of move the recommendation of the legislative hearing officer then. Any other discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is continued to October 13th. For the following item, the legislative hearing officer's recommendation is contested and additional testimony from the appellant is in the record. Item 17, RLH RR 20-44, 854 Edmond Avenue, and there is a staff report.
Ms. Mormont.
Council President, this is a proposed order to remove or repair this property. I'm sharing with you right now a photograph of the property so that you can center yourself. It is at 854 Edmund Street, and that will give you an idea of what we're talking about. With respect to the details of the case, this is a duplex. It's been a vacant building since December of 2016. At that point, it had been condemned as unfit for human habitation before it went in the vacant building program. In order to abate the nuisance, went out in August of 2020, and I began hearings on the property in October of 2020. During the course of its time in the vacant building program, there were 6 orders for garbage and rubbish, boarding and securing, tall grass and weeds, and so on. The owner of the property, who is on the line to testify today, her name is Ms. Susie Thill, inherited the property, I believe, about a year and a half ago. During the hearing process, she did post the $5,000 performance deposit and did get the code compliance inspection report. However, we have not made any progress in terms of getting a work plan, bids, or financing in place to go ahead and do the rehabilitation. Ms. Thill has not been as responsive as I would hope as we go through this process. Yesterday, we did have a hearing scheduled. We called her in twice to the hearing, and she did not attend. Lacking her participation, and we've gone several rounds now asking for the work plans and the financing. I need to send this to City Council and say, do you want me to continue working on this case and under what conditions? And I talked to Ms. Thill earlier in the afternoon about the kinds of things I would anticipate the council would look for in terms of more clear information on how she's going to approach getting the plans and the bids together, getting the financing together, so that there is something concrete. it has not been my practice to ask for these to be referred back without having something like that in place. I think it's possible, but it's going to require some elbow grease digging in. It's more than what we've seen so far. I can entertain any questions, or we can put Ms. Thill on the line right now.
All right, before we go to, and can you repeat the name? Is it Thill? Thill?
Susie Thill, Thill.
Okay, so before we go to Ms. Thill, I see Ms. Yang and Mr. Tao have questions. So let's start with Ms. Yang and then go to Mr. Tao.
Thanks. I wanted to flag that it looks like we all got an email from the Frogtown Neighborhood Association. They are interested in assessing the structural viability of the property. And so I was wondering if, Marsha, you received that beforehand already, and if you've already connected with Katie Royce. And if you have a recommendation on the table, like if it's inclusive of the communication from them.
Of course. The structural viability has already been assessed. There is a code compliance inspection report on the record outlining what is necessary in order for the building to be rehabilitated. The city does not facilitate or broker deals between private property owners and nonprofit or for-profit institutions to get the rehab done. The owner has indicated she is working with a contractor. We simply don't have plans manifest and attached to the record or financing locked in. Is that on the horizon? Yes. So when I get an email or see an email like that attached to the record, I think, yes, that is a district council sharing insight on what their interests are for the neighborhood. But the private property itself isn't something I wouldn't get in between the private property owner and that. So right now, I would say for my purposes, we are talking exclusively to the private property owner, trying to help get this to the other side and rehabilitated. Bottom line, the city really wants the nuisance condition to be abated. Honestly, abatement, unfortunately, means it's either rehabilitated or removed. And the only tool in the city's toolbox is removal. So we do try a lot. We've certainly been trying since October to get those plans in place so that the ultimate tool, the one we have, isn't the one we have to use, that somehow it can otherwise be addressed. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Mr. Tao.
Thank you, Council President. Marsha, can you, is this, you said that this property was inherited. Does Ms. Thill have other property in St. Paul?
I'm not aware of any, but I'm sure she could answer that. I don't, she's not a professional investor is my understanding, no.
Okay. Still, I think 5 years it's a very long time. And so I don't know if that it's a priority for Ms. Thill to rehab this property, though I do, based on your what you've been saying, is that Ms. Thill did make the $5,000 deposit and did have an inspection done, and to me that's really promising. But 5 years, it's a long time. It's 2000, you said 16, is that correct?
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Tao, the Susie Thill inherited the property, and she has been in possession of it for only a portion of its time in the vacant building program.
Okay.
I believe about a year and a half at this point she's been in possession of the property, and so certainly nothing has happened in that time period either, but not her the whole time.
Yeah, I think one of our goal in Ward 1 is to help property owners or motivate them to clean up their property and get them the help that they need to rehab so that family can move in. And we do have a housing shortage. And so I right now, I think 5-6 years, it's a long time. And so I'll wait to hear from what the property owner have to say.
All right. Ms. Prince.
Yeah, my question is, I understand, Ms. Mormon, that we cannot do anything through our action today to facilitate a third party from to get involved in this case, if I'm hearing you right. But it would also be my understanding that no matter what we would decide today, that there would be an opportunity, likely prior to the home being demolished, if that were the case, for that third party to contact the owner and try to get involved in this particular property. We had that happen with a building in Ms. Yang's ward at 1179 East 7th. So am I correct that whatever we do today would still allow the Frogtown Neighborhood Association to contact the owner and see if there's an opportunity to work together or whatever to save the house? My particular concern is that these small duplexes are really great affordable housing because they provide an income as well as a living unit for someone. So duplexes are really good for building generational wealth. And it would be a shame if what we do today were to result in losing that opportunity for a qualified buyer to get involved.
So if it would be all right, I think we should hear from the homeowner and understand what her desires are as well. So why don't we go to the public hearing, and then if we have further questions, we can follow up. Ms. Mormon, I see we have a caller on the line. Is that
Yes,
Ms. Thill?
it is. And it's not 100% clear to me if she's muted or unmuted at this point. Ms. Thill, are you there?
She looks like she's muted. And if she is muted and can't get unmuted, you can press *6 and that should help. Hopefully.
Okay.
There you go. Ms. Thill, you appear to be unmuted. Welcome. I can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So it definitely wasn't my intention to have this home vacant for so long. I did inherit the property, I think last maybe 2019, the summer. I transferred it over in August, and my intention was to start fixing up the house actually March. Me and my cousins are going to fix it up, and I flew them out here. That's when COVID happened, so we just kind of stopped everything. We were kind of scared, as everybody else was, and just kind of we're waiting for COVID to pass, and it hasn't. So we actually discussed this house and planned on starting it this spring, but then I started getting the letters. There's kind of a disconnect with the letters. I work out of town sometimes, so I was kind of going back and forth, and probably didn't put in as much effort as I could have getting my mail and making the meetings in the beginning. But I've definitely been putting in effort now. I have had a couple contractors look at it. I'm working with a company called Fat and Touch now, and actually paid them $2,000 because they said I have a solid house, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I actually had to pay them for something they said is normally free to get like an in-depth look at the house from, I don't know if they're called subcontractors. I'm not sure. Everything is new to me, so I'm learning as I go. So I had a meeting with them, initially planned the end of December, which got pushed because of a snowstorm to January 4th. They came out, looked at it. That's when they gave me the information that they'd need $2,000 to look into it. And then on the 14th of January, I met with them again. They initially told me it was going to take them a week to get me the numbers. I'm still waiting for the numbers. of how much it's going to cost. However, I did speak to him this afternoon, and he said he does have one plan ready and is ready to meet with me now with pricing. And they're doing it both as a single family home and as a duplex, just, for me to look at. And so they've got one of the plans ready for me to look at. So, that's been from January 14th until now. As far as the financing goes, I just want to let you know, I'm not a homeowner. So like all of this is brand new to me. Me and my cousins are pretty much putting up the majority of the funds to get this done. And I didn't realize that I was going to run into so many issues or the length of time that it has taken to get everything done. My cousins, which are the investors in the property with me, they are homeowners, and we've looked into several different loans to try to see what we could get done the quickest. But the home equity is against their home is going to be the one that is going to work best with us. And so we just started that process, and it could take up to a month. So I talked to my contractor today and asked him what he thought the time frame I needed, and then my investors what they thought was the amount of time that I needed. And we agreed around 6 weeks we should have everything done. I mean, we're so close to getting this property done. And like I said, I was originally given this home. I'm not a homeowner, and the sale of this home could allow me myself to become a homeowner. And so that was the reason why the previous owner had left it to me. And I actually lived in this house when I was a child. So I'd like to see it rehabilitated as well. So, I mean, this is where I'm at. I also spoke to my contractor this morning. I told him the situation, and he told me that if it doesn't go through with my cousins, who are the current investors, they have investors on their end that he would talk to, and they would be willing to work with me and be the investors in the home, and then just split the profits with me, because the house is completely right now paid off. So I've got a couple options that just kind of opened up today.
Great. That is great information. Thank you so much. And just kind of helping us map out like where you've been and how you got to this point. And of course, we are always, from the city's perspective, the property has been in the vacant building program for 5 years and probably was vacant significantly before that. And your role in this is much shorter than that. So it's really helpful to understand that distinction. I see Mr. Tao has a hand up to ask a question. So I'll direct him or you to him.
Thank you, Council President. Ms. Chow, thank you for coming on and sharing your side of the story and your experience. I want to let you know I appreciate you wanting to rehab this property and your investment in St. Paul. I think it's a great idea. Just two questions for you. One is, how much time do you think you need? I think 6 weeks is for you to get something in order with your contractor. It's helpful. But I want to hear how much time you think you need and what kind of help do you think you need from our office. This is something that our office would be interested in pointing you to some of the resources that we have in the city and in our partners, such as NeighborWorks and other institutions. But I want to hear from you.
Well, the amount of time that I think I need, and just talking to my contractor and my investors, would be 6 weeks. And the reason why I say 6 weeks, I guess the main part of it is for the financing. The bank that we're working with, the credit union we're working with, said it could take up to 30 days, they said. And, this is, of course, maximum. I added a couple of weeks just in case, because from my experience so far working with this, I've been told so many different deadlines from my contractors that haven't been made. So I just kind of giving myself a little bit more room for that. That's just kind of where I'm at. I'm on the tail end of getting it done. As far as resources of getting the house, completed. Like I said, everything is new to me. This is all 100%. I'm learning as I go. So, if there is a website with resources for anything to help me with that, that's great. I tried to look a little bit. I've been working a lot lately, and it's just kind of been a lot on me. So, any resources would help. I don't even know what resources are out there, honestly.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. No further question. I want to, Marsha, what do you recommend? You okay with the 6 week?
I am indeed. I think that her plan to work with private equity in this is going to make it go a lot more quickly. And to be fair, I think that working with private equity will also keep her from having to deal with many of the requirements tied to dollars that pass through government and CDCs that would increase the cost of the rehabilitation, usually between 25 and 50% higher if those dollars are used. So there's always a balancing act when you're looking at that funding. The 6 weeks, what I would recommend then is I would ask the council to refer the matter to legislative hearing on March 23rd, and we could review the plans where they're at that point. And because the council doesn't have a meeting on March 31st, I would ask that the council refer the matter or have it come back for a public hearing on April 7th, which it sounds like that would cover more than the 6 week time period that's being requested, and things should be ironed out at that juncture.
Thank you, Ms. Mormon. I think that's very generous, and I would move to with the recommendation of the hearing officer.
Wonderful. So Mr. Tom moves a recommendation of the legislative hearing officer, and I support that motion. And just encourage Ms. Thill to reach out to Ward 1 and to the city if we can be of assistance to you. Obviously, I second though what Ms. Mormon said, that a lot of times in these cases, if you have a private equity lined up, it is your most swift and efficient way to move forward. And the only other thing, which is a complete sidebar, is hopefully you're doing TikTok videos while you're doing this renovation, because these are the ones that I love to see the most, the before and after TikTok. So I'll be looking for them as well. So supporting Mr. Tao's motion. Any other discussion on that motion? All right, seeing none, roll call.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Did we lose Nelsie?
I think we lost her and now she's
I'm here.
back. Okay.
I'm in support of the recommendation.
Okay. Jalali,
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The item is referred to legislative hearing on March 23rd and then coming back to continue the public hearing on April 7th.
Thank you. And is that the end of our agenda, I believe?
That is.
All right. I just will quickly look to my colleagues to see if anyone has news from the wards or other sharing they'd like to do before we adjourn. It's been a long one. Up, Ms. Naker. Yeah. Up.
Thank you. It'll be quick, I promise. I just actually got this text that Restoration Inc. and Healing Streets, in partnership with Ramsey County Public Health, this Saturday, February 13th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. are hosting a Hope is Healing event, helping our city overcome the trauma of gun violence. We were just talking about this at our meeting earlier. This is an in-person event, but it's limited to 12 people at a time. But there will be grief support, spiritual wellness, financial resources for victims of violence, stress relief, and more, with folks who do speak Spanish there on site, and also free food and free gifts. So if people have questions about this, they can, looks like it's on the Ramsey County Public Health or Healing Streets website or social media.
Thank you, Ms. Naker. Ms. Yang.
Thanks. I wanted to share about a free food giveaway event that's happening here in St. Paul. It's on the 20th. Still a little ways out, but if you're interested, you can add it to your calendar. Again, on the 20th, it starts at 11 a.m. and it's hosted by the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, along with St. Paul Regional Labor Federation. And the address for that is 1330 Conway Street. So we have it on our Facebook, and I can also email it to all of you so you can add it to your Facebook too.
Thank you so much. Any other news or thoughts before we go? All right. Thanks, everybody. Lots of work here today. I appreciate it. And with nothing else before us, we are adjourned.